Welcome back to StoriesX, where we uncover the extraordinary within ordinary lives. In a quiet little town, a devoted waitress lost her job after standing up for Elon Musk. But what happened the very next day changed everything. Before we dive into the details, help us reach 99 likes on this video, so we can keep bringing you more amazing stories. Now, let's discover how one act of faith, one moment of risk, led to an unexpected and life-altering opportunity. The evening shift had always been quiet for Jada, a 28-year-old waitress working at Poppy's Café, an old-fashioned, cozy spot tucked away on a side street where time seemed to trickle by slowly. The regulars were mostly older folks, retirees, history buffs, and former factory workers who gathered to sip coffee and reminisce. For Jada, this predictable routine was a balm. She enjoyed the gentle hum of conversation, the soft clinks of porcelain cups, and the warm, buttery scent of pie drifting from the kitchen. Nothing about this evening suggested it would be any different. But just before closing time, as she wiped down a table near the window, the bell above the door chimed and changed everything. Jada glanced up, expecting another familiar face, or maybe a lost tourist. Instead, she froze, her eyes widening. Stepping inside as if he were just another weary traveler was Elon Musk. Yes, that Elon Musk, the world-famous entrepreneur known for Tesla, SpaceX, and a slew of controversial opinions. He looked a bit tired, wearing a casual jacket and jeans, scanning the nearly empty cafe before taking a seat at a booth by the window. The few remaining customers stirred. Jada could hear soft murmurs spreading through the cafe like ripples in a pond. Some of the regulars peered over their shoulders, whispering to one another. She recognized that mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Musk's reputation preceded him. Everyone had an opinion about him. Whether they admired his visionary projects or doubted his motives, Jada's heart fluttered. She had seen him countless times on TV and online. To find him here in this quiet corner of town was surreal. Collecting herself, she approached his table, putting on her warmest, most smile. "Hi there," she said softly. "What can I get you tonight?" He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Just a coffee, black, and maybe a slice of whatever pie you have," he replied, his tone polite but distant, as if his mind were elsewhere. Jada nodded, coming right up. At the counter, she poured his coffee and cut a slice of apple pie. Behind her, the regulars were still buzzing softly. She heard a few irritated whispers. "What's he doing here? Can't trust that guy. Just wants more control," and so on. She wondered why they felt so strongly. As far as she knew, Musk's ideas were controversial, sure, but wasn't it possible he had good intentions? Jada prided herself on giving everyone a fair chance, customer or not. She carried the coffee and pie back to his table. "Here you go," she said, placing them gently in front of him. Musk thanked her, then gazed out the window as if lost in thought. Jada lingered a moment, curious, but then retreated behind the counter to give him space. Despite the tension in the room, he seemed calm. If he noticed the stares, he didn't show it. At first, Jada thought the night might end quietly after all. Maybe Musk would finish his pie, pay his bill, and slip back into the night. But fate had other plans. One of the regulars, Frank, a gruff retiree with a habit of speaking his mind, stood up and approached Musk's booth. Jada's stomach twisted as she watched from behind the counter, her fingertips pressing into the wooden surface. She could sense the atmosphere shifting, thickening like a storm about to break. Each second stretched, crackling with the energy of unspoken judgments and unresolved questions. In that charged silence, Jada braced herself, knowing that whatever happened next might challenge everything she believed about fairness, decency, and the cost of speaking up. Jada watched anxiously as Frank stopped beside Elon's booth, his arms crossed over his chest. The old man's jaw was set, and his gaze narrowed. She knew Frank. He was never one to hold back an opinion. Tonight it looked like he had a target. "Hey," Frank said, his voice carrying enough volume to hush the quiet murmurs. "Aren't you the guy who helped start OpenAI once upon a time, then left because things didn't go your way?" The words dripped with suspicion. Elon glanced up, pausing with his coffee halfway to his lips. He studied Frank for a moment before answering. "I was involved in the early days, yes," he said evenly. "I had concerns about the direction they were taking." Jada's heart thudded. She could feel the other customers leaning in, hungry for conflict. A few chairs creaked as people shifted, listening carefully. Some wore skeptical frowns, others just looked curious. A part of Jada wanted to intervene to keep the peace, but she held herself back. For now. Frank scoffed. "Oh, right. So now you've started your own AI venture. XAI, isn't it? Let me guess. You think you can do it better, safer, more aligned with the truth? Or is it just about control, more money, more power?" His words came out sharp, each syllable landing like a jab. Elon set his coffee down. "It's not about control or profit," he replied quietly. "AI is a powerful tool, and I believe it should be developed responsibly. Transparency, accountability, these things matter. I want to ensure we don't look back and realize we failed to keep it in check." A soft hiss passed through the room, a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. Someone near the door muttered, "He's always got an excuse." Another voice said, "Maybe he's got a point." The tension thickened like a wire pulled taut. Jada felt a tug at her conscience. She had no personal stake in Elon's arguments, but something about the way he calmly held his ground stirred her respect. He didn't lash out or try to belittle Frank. Instead, he presented a reasoned stance, even if no one here wanted to hear it. Frank rolled his eyes. "Sure, talk's cheap," he said. "You'll say whatever suits you now. I've seen enough billionaires promising the world and delivering what's best for their pockets." Jada couldn't take it anymore. Without fully thinking it through, she stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I know everyone here has strong opinions, but maybe we shouldn't jump to conclusions. Innovation sometimes means trying different paths." The cafe fell silent. All eyes turned to her. In that moment, Jada realized the risk she was taking. These were regulars, people she served day in and day out. People who tipped her, who recognized her face. Was she really going to challenge them? Elon's gaze flicked toward her, a hint of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. She pressed on. "Change is never comfortable. We can doubt motives, but that doesn't mean everything is self-serving. Maybe he's sincere. Maybe working towards safer AI is worth something." Mr. Smith, the cafe's owner, appeared from the back room, his brow furrowed. He took in the scene. Jada confronting a customer, customers grumbling. Elon Musk in the middle of it all. "Jada," he said, voice tight. "I think that's enough. Our customers come first. Let's not stir things up." Heat flushed Jada's cheeks. She realized with a sinking feeling that standing up for what she believed in could cost her. Still, as she met her boss's stern gaze, she knew she couldn't just stay silent. The line had been crossed and there would be consequences. Jada's heart thumped in her chest as she stood near Elon's booth, caught between her boss's stern warning and the silent scrutiny of the customers. The cafe's usually warm atmosphere had turned tense and brittle, like thin ice waiting to crack. Outside, the streetlights were dim, casting long shadows across the floor. Inside, everyone seemed to hold their breath. Mr. Smith crossed his arms and stepped forward, placing himself between Jada and the curious eyes of the patrons. His voice was calm, but the note of displeasure ran clear. "Jada, I've told you before, we don't take sides here. Customers come first. If you have opinions, keep them quiet. This isn't a debate club." Jada swallowed hard. She'd worked at Poppy's Cafe for 3 years. She knew the regulars by name, had learned their favorite pies and how they liked their coffee. She'd believed that familiarity bred respect. Now it seemed that standing up for what she believed in, fairness, open-mindedness, could cost her everything. She forced a steady tone. "Mr. Smith, I understand, but I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just think we shouldn't jump to conclusions about someone's motives. Isn't it possible that he's genuinely trying to do something good?" Across the room, Frank scoffed, shaking his head. Another customer, Agnes, a quiet widow who seldom spoke, pursed her lips in disapproval. Whispers flared up again, low and harsh. Some questioned Jada's loyalty. Others just wanted the night's peace restored without drama. Elon Musk sat still, watching intently, his eyes moving between Jada and Mr. Smith. He hadn't said a word since Jada's intervention. His posture was calm, but Jada sensed he was measuring the situation. Perhaps he'd seen this kind of backlash before, or maybe he was surprised that a stranger would risk her own standing to defend him. Mr. Smith exhaled heavily. Jada, I appreciate you wanting to be fair, but you have to understand our position. The customers here, they pay the bills. If they're uncomfortable, if they feel you're taking sides against them, that's not good for business. He paused, shaking his head. I'm sorry, but this isn't the first time you've spoken up out of turn. I have to think about what's best for Poppies. Jada's stomach twisted. She'd never imagined it would come to this. Her voice trembled slightly. You mean, you're letting me go? The hush in the cafe grew deeper. Even Frank looked startled by the turn of events, as if he hadn't intended to push matters this far. Jada caught a flicker of discomfort crossing a few patrons' faces. Perhaps they hadn't meant to jeopardize her job. Maybe they just wanted their opinions heard. Not realizing the cost, Mr. Smith nodded reluctantly. I'm sorry, Jada. I'll give you a few days, but I think it's time we part ways. The words slammed into her like a cold wind. She stood rooted to the spot, blinking back tears. All her time here, learning to bake an apple pie just right, memorizing who liked their coffee black, reduced to dust because she dared to speak. Elon cleared his throat softly. I'm truly sorry, he said, meeting her gaze. I never intended for this to happen. Jada pressed her lips together, mustering a shaky smile. It's not your fault. I said what I felt was right. I don't regret that. She turned to Mr. Smith. I understand your decision, she managed, voice steady now. I'll finish my last shifts. Then, with a dignity she didn't know she possessed, Jada moved away from the booth. Her head held high, tears stinging her eyes. She prepared herself for an uncertain future. Her defense had cost her dearly, but something inside whispered that this wasn't the end of her story. Jada arrived at Poppy's Cafe the next morning feeling hollow. She hadn't slept well. Her mind replayed the previous night's confrontation, the anger in Frank's voice, the silence of the regulars, the look of disappointment on Mr. Smith's face when she dared speak up. She was here only to finish the shifts Mr. Smith had allowed her, but the familiar comfort of the cafe had vanished. Now every corner reminded her that this sanctuary of routine would soon be lost to her. As she tied her apron and stepped behind the counter, the atmosphere felt different. The regulars were quieter, as if collectively ashamed of the role they'd played in her downfall. A few risked glances in her direction, their eyes flickering with regret or confusion, but none approached her to apologize or ask how she was feeling. Jada kept her head down, determined to get through the day. Midway through the morning, the bell above the door chimed. Jada turned, expecting another familiar face. Instead, she froze again. Elon Musk stood at the threshold, his posture relaxed but intent. The cafe stilled at the sight of him. Even Mr. Smith, usually so composed, looked tense. The entrepreneur had returned and no one knew why. Jada's heart fluttered with anxiety. She didn't want more drama. She just wanted to finish her shift and quietly slip out of this chapter of her life. Yet, as Elon made his way to the same booth by the window, the air crackled with anticipation. This time, there were no open confrontations. The patrons watched warily, as if afraid to spark another conflict. Mr. Smith hovered near the kitchen door, arms folded. Jada considered sending one of her co-workers to serve Musk, but the two of them were busy with other tables. Gathering her courage, she approached him, forcing a polite smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "Coffee again?" He nodded, offering a small, understanding smile. "Yes, please. And the same pie if you have it." Jada retrieved his order quickly, her hands steady despite the tension. When she returned, Elon studied her face, concern flickering in his eyes. "I heard what happened," he said quietly, careful not to raise his voice above the gentle hum of the cafe. "You lost your job because you stood up for me," she shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "I knew the risk," she replied, voice low. "I just didn't think it would actually come to that." Elon leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone private. "I respect what you did. Not many would risk their livelihood to defend a stranger's motives. You showed integrity and empathy, qualities I value." Jada's throat tightened. She wasn't used to such direct praise. especially after last night's events. I only spoke what I believed. He nodded. And that deserves recognition. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small business card. The design was sleek, unadorned except for a simple logo she didn't recognize. I have a team looking for people who can handle community engagement, people who can bridge understanding and stand firm in their convictions. It's not glamorous, but it matters. Jada stared at the card, her pulse quickening. An offer? She glanced around, noticing Mr. Smith watching from afar, brows furrowed. The customers pretended not to eavesdrop, but their curiosity was palpable. "You're offering me a job?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elon smiled gently. "Yes. If you're interested, contact them. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise it won't be ordinary." Tears pricked at her eyes. Here, in the wake of losing what she thought was her safe haven, an unexpected door had opened. By risking her security for her beliefs, she had sparked an opportunity she never could have imagined. Jada took the card and held it tight, her heart lifting with cautious hope. Jada left Poppy's Cafe that afternoon with the business card tucked safely in her pocket. The sky outside was crisp and clear, the sun dipping low and warm against her face. She had just a couple more days on the schedule before Mr. Smith's ultimatum took effect. Though her heart still ached from losing the familiar comforts of the cafe, there was now a spark inside her, a cautious flame of possibility. That evening, in her small studio apartment, she stood by the kitchen counter staring at the card. Its design was minimalistic, bearing a simple logo she now recognized as part of Elon's new ventures. She took a deep breath and dialed the number printed below it. The phone rang twice before a calm voice answered. They confirmed what Elon had hinted. A community engagement position was available, and they would love to meet with her as soon as possible. She set up an interview for the following week, heart fluttering with nerves and anticipation. The next morning, Jada walked into Poppy's Cafe for what would be one of her last shifts. She felt an odd mixture of sadness and relief. The regulars looked at her differently. Some avoided her gaze, while a few murmured awkward hellos. Even Frank, who'd sparked the conflict, offered a sheepish nod when she refilled his coffee. He didn't apologize, but the air between them felt less charged, as if he realized things had gone too far. Midway through the shift, Mr. Smith approached her at the counter. He cleared his throat, eyes fixed on the register. "Jada," he began, voice low. "I know you're leaving soon. I just want to say, I didn't intend for it to end this way." She paused, a lump in her throat. "I understand you had to do what you thought was best for the cafe," she said quietly. "I won't pretend it doesn't hurt, but I respect your decision." He nodded, looking genuinely regretful. "For what it's worth, I never doubted your integrity. You were always a good waitress, I just couldn't afford conflict. I hope you find something that appreciates who you are." Jada offered a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Smith." She could have argued that defending someone's intentions shouldn't cost a job, but what would be the point now? She had already chosen her path when she opened her mouth that night. The hours ticked by, and as closing time approached, Jada took a moment to wander through the cafe's small dining area. She remembered how safe it had once felt, how comforting the routine had been, but safety without the freedom to speak her mind no longer seemed so appealing. Later, as she hung up her apron for the last time, her co-workers gave her quick hugs and well wishes. Some customers offered kind words. The tension had receded now that she was leaving, replaced by a muted respect. She realized that by risking her own security, she'd shown them something unexpected. That belief and courage weren't just lofty ideas, but actions that carried real cost and meaning. Stepping outside, the evening air felt cool and fresh. She had lost one job, but she had gained a sense of purpose. In a few days, she'd meet with Elon's team and see where that opportunity led. She might have to learn new skills, face new challenges, and navigate uncharted territory. But this time, she'd do it knowing that speaking up, protecting her convictions, had opened this door. Jada set off down the quiet street, the faint glow of streetlights guiding her way. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but she embraced the uncertainty, grateful for the spark of hope ignited by one bold stand. In the end, this story reminds us that standing up for what we believe in, even when it feels risky and uncertain, can open doors we never knew existed. Choosing integrity over comfort, faith over fear, may cost us something in the moment, but it also sets the stage for unexpected opportunities. When we dare to protect our convictions, we discover that the path forward, however unknown, can bring us closer to a future brighter than we ever imagined.